If you've read the title for this video, you already know what this is about. It's the Kamlan 50mm f1.1 lens. It's Sony E-mount for the cameras with APS-C sensors, so the A6500 and alike. I've been using it for a while now. I'm going to let you know a little bit more about it and how it performs optically. So the Kamlan 50mm f1.1, that's a pretty impressive aperture, and the lens only costs around about £150. There's actually a little bit of variance in the price. When we purchased it, it was $139.99, but it's currently on Amazon at $149.99. Now the lens itself, it's a solid metal construction. There is a focusing ring on the front there, and it's pretty nice and smooth actually, especially for a lens that costs £150. The aperture ring just below there is clickless, so you can smoothly go from f1.1 all the way up to f16. The aperture ring is reasonably firm when you go to turn it, so that's good and bad. I mean, it's good in terms of, because it's clickless, if you move it onto f2.8 for example, it will stay at 2.8. It takes a proper turn to move it away from that position. But if you are recording video, there is going to be some resistance on there, so you have to make sure the camera is firmly supported and locked down, or you may get some movement and shake from the camera as you're turning the aperture on the lens, so worth bearing in mind. The lens comes supplied with this plastic hood, and it just obviously clicks into place really simply on the end there. But without the hood on, you can actually see just how sort of diddy the lens is. And its metal construction means it's small, chunky, nice and weighty, and feels like it should cost a lot more than its £150 price tag. So the lens is 50mm, but the imaging circle it creates is only enough to cover the APS-C size sensor of the A6500 and APS-C Sony cameras. It doesn't cover the full frame sensor. So if you're using this on an A7R or A9, something with a full frame sensor, then you're going to have to switch it into the APS-C mode on the camera. Now there's no electronic connections on here whatsoever, so the camera doesn't know what aperture you're using, and it also doesn't know that it's an APS-C size lens, so you are going to have to switch that APS-C mode manually. Now when you are in the APS-C mode, there is some quite heavy vignetting in the corners, but this lens is kind of really designed for portraiture and things like that, where you want the attention drawn to the center of the image. So the vignetting, really, it doesn't concern me too much. It's there at 1.1, stopped down to nearer 2.8, and it's become sort of very soft, very gentle, and overall it's quite nice. In terms of sharpness, let's face it, if you buy this lens, you're going to be using it at f1.1, maybe f2, but you're buying this because of its headline feature, it's f1.1. In the center of the frame, it's acceptably sharp. It's not pin sharp, you know, it's not going to blow anybody away with the image quality, but it's sharp enough that you can produce some nice images. And you also have to remember this is a fully manual focus lens. Now you have to be really precise when you're shooting with an f1.1 aperture to make sure that what you want in focus is pin sharp anyway. If you're photographing a portrait, even the slightest movement back and forth from the subject or from your camera can just nudge that point of focus out. The edges, they're soft. It's a nice soft. They're not sort of terrible, but again, this isn't the world's sharpest lens, but you shouldn't expect it to be for this price. There are some chromatic aberrations that we noticed. You know, the old high contrast shooting through trees tests produced a little bit of magenta fringing, and you do see some chromatic aberration. It's a cheap lens. It hasn't got the best quality glass in it. It hasn't got the best quality coatings on it, but it produces images that have a kind of vintage lens kind of feel. It sort of reminds me of my 50mm Nikkor f1.4 lens from sort of about 1965. It's not as sharp as that lens, but in terms of the kind of contrast and quality from it, it is very similar. f1.1, this thing is all about those out of focus areas, the bokeh of the image, and from that point of view, this performs spectacularly. If you're shooting at night with all the city streets and the lights, etc., you can really throw all those lights completely out of focus and create those kind of magical bokeh backgrounds that, you know, everybody sees and we like and get thousands and thousands of likes on Instagram. It's a really nice lens for that. And if you've just started with the Sony E-mount system, you've got an A6000, 6500, 6300, or even if you've got an A7 and you're just looking for something cheap, f1.1 to kind of try out this type of imagery, then this is a fantastic purchase for the price. Again, it's not the best image quality. It does have its flaws, but overall, you can't really knock it too much for its value and its build quality. One thing to note is that the minimum focusing distance is 50 centimeters. Now, I personally would have preferred a lens that would have been nearer 30, 35, even 40 at a push, just to be able to get a tiny bit closer to the subject. But again, can't complain too much because it's £150. When you're looking at what else you can buy for £150, you're looking at the kind of 50mm lenses from Canon, Nikon, you know, the proprietary 50mm lenses. Now, they generally have an f1.8 aperture and they're going to cover full frame, not just APS-C. But you're not going to get an f1.4 lens for £150 unless you get lucky secondhand. So to be able to buy an f1.1 lens for that is kind of out of this world. And if you think about it as a 85mm lens equivalent on a full frame camera, it's a pretty neat bit of glass. If you use this lens on a Sony A7R, A7R II, where you've got 36, 42 million pixel sensors, then even when you're using it in the APS-C crop mode, you're getting a really nice portrait lens for £150. And it's still going to give you sort of 15, 16 million pixel images from that, even when it's in that crop mode. And again, for that price, you can't really argue with it. So quick summary, is it the best lens in the world? Far from it. The images are a tiny bit soft. There's a lot of vignetting. There is some chromatic aberration if you're not careful with it. But despite all of those, it's still absolutely great value for money and produces images that have that kind of vintage feel, which is currently very much flavour of the month on Instagram and social media. So I can see this lens being really popular. It took us about a week, 2 weeks to get it from Hong Kong. And actually it's worth noting that there was an additional £20 import duty charge on it. So add that to the price, you're probably looking at paying around £160, £170 for this lens. I'll put all the details for this Kamlan lens in the description below. We've got loads more lens tests coming up in the next few weeks actually. So if you want to keep up to date with all the latest photo gear news and reviews, make sure you hit that subscribe button.